Hey everyone, it's a brain of vat again. Let me try to get this set up a bit better so that I can see your comments. I realize it's probably a better technique to pop out the chat from YouTube and then put it over on the side so then I can see all of you. Hello, Nelly and Insightful and Andrea, Victor, Victoria. Miss Platty, good evening, good morning, whatever your time zone is. Uh, how is everyone today, tonight, tomorrow, yesterday? Are you all good? Uh-oh, is that a happy pandrum, Platty? Is that a sad pandrum? I'm a cereal now. Brain of Vat. I didn't say I'm the brain of Vatican. Good afternoon, Miss Bammy. We missed you the other day. I think the last couple times. Hope everything is well. So first thing to announce, I'm a bit cranky, I think, today. So maybe it'll come off. I'm I'm a bit annoyed, but maybe it's I don't think I slept well enough and then I, you know, was presented with a video and it's just again annoying to realize the just utter gullibility and credulity of people. And especially in this true crime space. And again, it's not exclusive to true crime. It's a ubiquitous phenomenon among credulous humans who believe things for bad reasons or no reasons at all. And so I'm going to probably expose a fraud, another fraud in this space, but we'll talk about lots of poor ideas that circulate and pretend to be legitimate. Um, what am I talking about? I'm talking about pseudoscience and how pseudoscience thrives in a world of excessively credulous and gullible humans. Hello, Anais and Christy. And so, yeah, I'll wait a bit. Is my chat working? Okay, my chat's working now. Didn't work the last time. PB&J High Skeptic just came over from Web Sleuths. I've been meaning to thank you for going on our channel and for all you do in exposing the bad actors. I was a subscriber to you earlier, but does that mean I offended you and in some way and you didn't like me anymore? Well, good afternoon, Miss Trisha. How are you, my dearest friend? Hope all is well. Doohickey, that it weirded me out watching a brain in a box. Sorry about that. I'm back in the house, literally, like not like, hey everyone, skeptic in the house, but like skeptic literally in the house, like between walls and ceilings and stuff, because I was outside and I liked being outside. I want to go back outside. It's so comfortable. I felt like, you know, I was somehow letting my animalistic tendencies be free in nature, listening to birds and seeing the possums and the raccoons coming to my back porch all the time and all the pretty birds. Now, I didn't so much like getting bit in the ass every morning by mosquitoes because I have to fix my deck because of a hurricane a few years ago. My screens have come off the deck and I have to re-screen everything. I've managed to get most of them fixed, but there are still a couple. As a matter of fact, the reason I'm not outside anymore is because Percy found a little trick escape route, and I panicked the other night because he somehow got out, and then I couldn't find him. And then when I finally found him, can you talk about the relationship of science and art sometime? Um, sure, if you remind me later. I mean, we're essentially talking about aesthetics, so we're talking about philosophy, but obviously there are intersections between science and art, so maybe we can try to figure out how we can address that. Obviously, art is doing something to our brain, and therefore can be subjected to scientific analysis. So let's see, where do I want to start? We'll probably wait a bit. And so I was, what do I want to say? Well, again, just pseudoscience is, as a scientific skeptic, we deal with truth claims. We evaluate all truth claims. There's sort of scientific skepticism and the scientific method and philosophy are just approaches to addressing questions that humans have about the nature of reality. And because, as I've told you, by evolution, we are answer seeking animals, we are question asking animals. And to, at this point, the most dependable um, method or set of procedures that or said another way in philosophical terms, the best epistemology, the best way to go about trying to figure out what are the best or most likely answers to many of our questions is a thing called science. And we've been doing it for a very long time, and we've gotten better, and we've learned an awful lot about the world and cause and effect by employing this way of knowing, which we refer to as science. And we have a method, which we refer to as the scientific method. And some people have asked me, am I a, scientific pluralist? So that question essentially asks, do I believe that there is one scientific method or more than one? And I reluctantly have to um, essentially agree that there are more than one way, more than one ways, more than one ways to do science. And part of the problem, one of the reasons for that, is that in the social sciences, for example, you can't necessarily subject human beings to the sort of rigorous, controlled experiments that you can with chemicals or subatomic particles or molecules. So, physics, and that's why we often say, as scientists, as a social scientist myself, that we all, to a certain extent, suffer from what we call physics envy, because physics is um, a more solid science in the sense that we can control for the multitude of variables in a way that we cannot when we're trying to understand things like sociology, human psychology, group psychology, and other behavioral aspects of biology, of other animals. And am I sick? Sick and tired. Yes, I'm a bit sick and tired, but no, I'm not sick. Do I sound stuffed up or something? I haven't been up as long as that's why I may be a bit cranky. I fell asleep too early last night, and then I woke up in the middle of the night, and then I watched some television, and then I was probably up a little bit too much, too long, and then yeah, no, I don't think I'm congested. Probably a bit tired. You think he looks a little yellow? Yeah, my lighting, my girlfriend made fun of me and said I looked jaundiced because I moved my light here, and I mean, I could get out my green light setup and my green screen setup, and I could probably get my big lights and point them at me and get a better color, but I don't have a cover on this light bulb, so bear with my yellowness. It's not jaundice, I promise. Yeah, and my walls are a little off white. As a matter of fact, I'm trying to paint. I showed you guys the other night that I have I patched up my ceiling because I've been wanting to sell my house, and there were a couple of spots that I had neglected over the years, and so I patched them up, and now I need to do some sandpapering, which I'm not looking forward to because it's gonna get my eyes and be icky, and then I need to paint, and, I mean, I think I'll end up I have another couple of cans of paint in the shed. I'll end up probably using those, and, I think it's a bit of an off-white. Um, so back to, again, you know, the value of science and what we mean by science. Science is essentially just subjecting truth claims to a method or set of methods. And ultimately, the reason we have the scientific method is because we recognize that human brains play tricks on us. And we recognize that our senses are flawed. So, in order to overcome some of these limitations to our ability to try to figure out how the world works, we have invented over the millennia, and then continued to fine tune a set of methods and procedures to control for our human shortcomings, our cognitive shortcomings, our biases toward certain things that we want to believe, which may or may not be true. And so the reason why I'm such an advocate for science is, well, first of all, look around you. If you doubt the value of science, then you need to look around where you are right now. You need to look and understand that essentially, if it's not a rock or your cat or dog or a fellow human, everything around you right now is likely the consequence of science or applied science, technology, architecture, engineering, medicine. These are all applied sciences. They are the consequence of us having figured things out, like how physics works, how cause and effect works, um, how to build computer circuits that actually convert electricity into information, and how we then understand the curvature of time space thanks to Einstein to be able to transmit information up to a satellite and calculate a location on the Earth, a thing you might have heard of called GPS. We know how to cure certain diseases because we have applied the scientific method. We have a thing called germ theory, which replaced a whole host of earlier prototypical hypotheses about what caused diseases. So we used to believe that witchcraft was responsible for disease. We used to believe that there was this magical stuff in the air. And people to this day still believe in those sorts of things. Um, and that these this stuff got into you and caused diseases. And then we learned that these diseases, many diseases, are the function of antigens, bacteria, viruses, um, you know, things that you can't see with the naked eye. That once we subjected certain pathologies, certain um, human symptoms, illnesses, to things like microscopes, we recognize that they had been essentially invaded by some sort of small pathogen, some sort of harmful piece of biology, for example, some sort of a fungi, or some sort of fungus, or bacteria, or viruses that the naked eye couldn't see. And it wasn't until we got really good at this thing called science that we were able to figure out how diseases are often caused. So, I mean, I'm not going to go into the history of science, but suffice it to say that um, I challenge you to um, come up with a better way of knowing than science and the scientific method, and to avoid straw men. We all concede that science does not know everything. We concede that the scientific method can be improved. We concede that science is tentative, provisional. It's based on the best available evidence that we have at our disposal today, and that surely we will get better and improve, and there will be certain things that may have a strong consensus today that may be overturned as we get more information. But you'll find that science, for the most part, is additive. It is accumulative. We tend to learn more about the natural world with time, and very often um, we we will then tweak maybe a hypothesis or a scientific theory and improve upon it. So, for example, the example that we tend to use the most often is Einstein's theory of general relativity and how it augmented, it improved upon Newton's laws of motion. So this did not demonstrate, Einstein did not disprove Newton. He did not overturn Newtonian physics. He simply augmented or modified it or added additional information, um, because at the time of Newton, we couldn't look out into distant space. We didn't know enough at that point to recognize that time and space curve around large bodies of matter. So 99.999% of the time, you can use Newtonian laws of motion and physics, and it'll get you the answer that you need to do your job. But if you're building GPS systems or you're building a rocket ship and trying to um, establish a trajectory to get to Mars, well, then you're going to need to talk with Einstein, because Einstein figured out some stuff that Newton hadn't at the time. So, so yes, so I'm very fond of science and the scientific method, and because not only does it update as it learns more, it also, it's just in the words of Richard Dawkins, it works, bitches. So you'd be hard pressed to, do you believe it all in gut feelings or intuition? I certainly believe in it, and I would never and have never said that you should ignore gut or intuition. I think that you can glean things about the natural world via gut feelings or intuition. We evolved these senses to be able to survive. So obviously they provide some natural selection value, um, in order to help us survive. That's why we have these um, behaviors. But we now know, via the scientific method, you know, many of the ways that both gut and intuition can deceive us and provide us with wrong answers. So, by all means, don't ignore your gut or your intuition. And in many cases, we don't have the ability to stop and take out our ruler and our calculator and subject our environment to a scientific experimentation, and we are left with nothing but our gut and intuition. And these are where they can come in quite handy. But as a method for trying to understand the world as a whole, um, science does not sort of accept gut or intuition as evidence. Although we would say that um, in certain areas of science where we can't necessarily subject human beings to experimentation, we do accept things like anecdote, gut, and intuition. For example, a doctor who's trying to make a diagnosis. Well, what do? You have to interview a patient, and when the patient tells you that they have this or that symptom, we are presuming them to be honest and to have certain um, problems, and we attempt to draw a diagnosis from the symptomology. So, a medical diagnosis is very often the consequence of somebody telling you how they feel. Um, my gut never betrayed me. Well, that's an anecdote and that's an opinion. You'd have to submit that to a fairly controlled experimentation for me to believe you. Um, my gut certainly betrayed me many times. And we also have a whole host of cognitive tendencies which justify the way your gut feels. As I told in my last, as we discussed in the last live stream, the way we best now understand intelligence. Intelligence is very often just a rationalization engine for the way you feel. So you feel a certain way, and then your brain has evolved to provide you with excuses which justify the way you feel. These are what we were talking about when we discuss cognitive biases, all the ways that your brains fool you into believing that you're right, that you know things, that your intuitions are dependable. And unfortunately, when we subject them to proper scientific analysis, we find that they are far too flawed to depend upon. And that's why things like testimonials and eyewitness accounts don't hold up very well in a court of law. And a court of law, by the way, is a very different burden of proof than um, scientific investigation. There's a lower bar of so called truth when we're discussing the law as opposed to science. Science is the most stringent, the most strict um, set of methods to go about trying to figure out how the universe actually is. And its dependability is in its predictive power. Its ability to, I mean, we just literally changed the trajectory of a meteor, I think, the other day. That's based on a massive body of scientific evidence. We don't make things up in science. We don't guess, really. I mean, a hypothesis is a well informed guess, but then we subject it to actual evidence and we do actual math and we control and blind studies so that human brains can't interfere, so that our feelings don't interfere in the outcome. And we um, then, for example, as I've discussed in prior lives, we double blind, we triple blind to make sure that human biases do not influence an experiment. You're something of a scientist yourself, Skep. Yeah, well, you're something of a big deal too. And of course, we all know that. I'm going to take a little bit of a break and just try to read up because then we're going to talk about pseudoscience in all of its many forms, how it sort of some of the reasons that it speaks to us, why we believe it, um, and then I'm going to show a couple examples in this space, and and then sort of debunk them and show how nonsensical they are, and why we should be far more critical, and how to be able to identify something like pseudoscience as distinguished from science. So let me try to stop the next song on a classic radio station. So coming up next, we have the song that was on the top rock and roll charts for 14 consecutive weeks, Led Zeppelin's Moby Dick. Good evening, Miss Xana May. Punizione. First of all, I like the name Punizione because it's Italian. That must be punishment, correct? I never understand why we call it gut feeling is in our brain. Correct, Punizione. It is in our brain. Everything, mostly, for the most part, is occurring in a nervous system. We refer to the brain as being the master control center of the nervous system, but the nervous system goes all through your body. So very often we have people that we call, mind body dualists. I am a monist, so I don't believe there is a distinction. We are just an organism. We are a single entity, and we have different parts that provide, perform different functions. But the brain is the center of where most of the activity, the interesting activity, takes place. Bowels are master control on this ship. Yeah, I mean most of it's controlled by a very complex nervous system, and most of what's going on that's interesting is likely happening in the brain. I'm in Italy. That's why I don't come in chat much too late here. Yeah, you're maybe when I if I move to Italy, that's maybe a tentative plan. So maybe then it'll be easier for you to come in. Where in Italy are you, Marigold? Va chier. Va chier, connard. Putain de merde, connard. Va te faire foutre. Tu me fais chier, toi. Um, ça m'énerve. Ça m'énerve. Oh my God, I've forgotten so much of my French. Tu m'énerves. Tu m'ennuies. Tu me fais chier. Tu m'emmerdes. That's another one. Tu me fais chier. Tu m'emmerdes. Same thing. The French are obsessed with their bodily functions. Anglo-Saxons tend to prefer talking about genitalia and copulation, whereas the French seem to be more obsessed with bodily fluids. I don't know. Maybe you guys can explain that. You are in northern Italy. Are you planning to come? Well, I lived in Switzerland, in Geneva, for 17 years, and I did live in Siena for a summer. And I am half Italian, and I've certainly traveled through Italy fairly extensively. Uh, Pizarro. I don't know where Pizarro is. It's in Tuscany or Pesaro. Yeah, I figured there was that A didn't look right at the beginning, but Pesaro. My Italian's rusty. Ma posso parlare un po' di italiano, ma non posso praticare. Non, non ho molti amici con cui posso comunicare. Allora ho dimenticato molto. How's that? Ma sono mezzo italiano. Mia nonna era di Abruzzo e mio nonno era di Napoli. How's my Italian? How's my accent? Not bad? Do a cooking show sometime. I do love to cook. And my grandmother was the best cook I've ever met. I mean, Italian grandmas, right? Doesn't get much better. At least you guys are cheering me up. I'm not as cranky as I was. But I might get cranky again. Because when I wake up in the morning and somebody sends me a video of some crank in true crime, especially when they have a doctor in front of their name, it it annoys me because I'm a scientific skeptic. That's what we do, is debunk these foolish claims. And you speak 9 languages. Well, I only speak 4, so I am unworthy. If you speak 9, good for you. I'm impressed. And I'm only fluent in 2. My Italian and Spanish are a bit wanting. I do not suck in the kitchen. I'm talented. Well, I have my moments, let's say it that way. Some dishes I think I'm pretty damn good at making, but sometimes I'm a bit too disorganized and I don't follow any method. And see, since I'm promoting science, I mean, if you want to be a good cook, if you want to do anything well, you need to be able to repeat things and follow procedures, methodologies, lies. Aglio, basilico, oregano. I'm from Tennessee. I barely speak one. Yeah, Americans are not known for their linguistic prowess. Thank you, Marigold. I got pretty good in 3 months in Siena. I used to hear it in my grandmother's household. My mother can't speak it, but she understands it better than I do because my grandparents used to speak it in her house. Have you ever had bacala? Bacala? No, I have. Ooh, well, I already know I wouldn't like it. Salted cod, not my thing. But I have made a joke about, you know, going out and committing mayhem wearing baklava, which sounds silly because I can never remember what that mask is. So I just call it, you know, a Greek dessert. Did your Italian parents do oatmeal with olive oil? No, but I was a big fan of bruschetta before bruschetta became a thing, and my grandmother didn't make bruschetta the way that they make bruschetta today. But in any case, okay, I think we've um, I don't know if anybody wants to keep track of any good questions because I'm sure I'll miss stuff, but I want to then. I mean, I'm just doing this off the top of my head, but essentially what happened was, and we've touched on it before. You know, how do I want to start out? This true crime space, true crime, as I've discussed before, it's a delicate topic. A set of it required that come with education and experience and base here, which lay and which is important if you want to handle true. For I'm not saying you can't report or discuss true crime without, a PhD in criminology or 30 years of, law enforcement. But you certainly need to at least have a fairly strong foundation in ethics, understanding how to be careful when you're talking about topics in true crime, how to be sensitive to, um, you know, human brains who are being exposed to rather sad, depressing, and frightening topics. Um, might I'm breaking up? I might have too many things open on my screen, but and so I think that there at least should be some sort of basic skill set to have a true crime channel, and then the best of our true crime channels are ones that have a full body of the prerequisite skills that I think are necessary to handle this topic well. And if the channel creator doesn't have it, at least they're bringing on, good guests who can fill in our gaps um, of knowledge when it comes to handling this topic. And because, I mean, the reason I'm here, of course, is because of so many frauds, charlatans, dregs, in many cases, some of them criminals. And am I criminaling right now? Yes, I'm criminaling. Matter of fact, there's a segue into somebody I'm talking about because it's Chris McDonough and his accusation and his empty threats to sue me, and claims that I'm criminaling. So the person I'm going to expose the fraud, you know, it's not for nothing. Um, that there's a link here. So in this space anyway, because it's because humans care about crime and because we want to understand ourselves and we want to understand the causes for crime and we want and we seek justice because we are a social animal who doesn't like um, innocent people being victimized by our nature as a social animal. So there are very good reasons why true crime will always have an audience because it teaches us a bit about ourselves. It may help us avoid future victimization, help provide comfort for those who have been victims. So there are a lot of very obvious reasons why true crime was Skip trying to break up with us. I think maybe the internet connection is not as good. If I am breaking up, I did notice on my live the other night it was breaking up a little bit. So anyway, the point is, and I covered that. I think I made a video called the moral rot, or I don't remember if it was the what was it, the caveman, the immoral caveman who has regressive ethics, and all of the channels that promote essentially a presumption of guilt as opposed to presumption of innocence, and they speculate out their backside in a way that's obviously sensational and you know fairly conspicuous in that good reasons to believe these are my true crime bad actors when they're employing a whole host of tactics which seem more designed to get views, likes, and money than they are having any concern for victims or true crime, or they just employ a whole host of unscrupulous and incompetent and ignorant tactics to get what it is that they want, to grow their channel and make money and get popular. And so, that's sort of why I'm here, is to at least be some sort of counter force to the success of these horrific and arguably extremely dangerous channels. And if you followed me for any amount of time, you know who my initial target was, why I came to this channel. His name is Chris McDonough. He runs a channel called The Interview Room. So, and he's just a primary target because he has actually street cred, but he's not employing his professional credentials to handle true crime on YouTube. He's just doing it to make money. It's just a new career for him, and he's employed a whole host of um, dregs to promote himself in exchange for promoting the dregs, which is why the relationships succeed. And there are a lot of other large channels that succeed through a various set of fairly well known dishonest tactics. And so that bothers me. It makes me cranky because I don't like people getting duped. As a scientific skeptic and a humanist, we believe in things called facts. We believe in conversations about ethics, and we care about things like having a higher standard of ethics and challenging people that either don't have respect for facts or competence or ethics, because they manipulate people, they take advantage of people, they make money off of people good intentions, um, people's good instincts, um, and they feed off of our emotional shortcomings and our neediness and our credulity and our excessive trust, and they manipulate our brains, unconsciously or consciously, in order to get what they want from you. And I think that that's unfair. And I am happy when there are channels that, I'm not alone. There are plenty of people out there going after my true crime bad actors, trying to at least act as a buffer or a counter to try to challenge their bad claims, their false claims, and their lowbrow deceptive tactics. In my space, we just call it all sophistry or deceptive rhetoric, if you want. So, all of that aside, I mean, me, I can go off for hours on these topics, but you guys already know who I am. So, I'm going to show, I received this morning a video from an individual that I have um, already interacted with actually once. And so I'm going to talk about pseudoscience and I will try to differentiate pseudoscience from science to the extent possible. I'm not going to do a deep dive because I'd probably bore you, but I've been writing about philosophy of science for a very long time. And as a social scientist myself in two domains, I take a bit offense of people who speak in the name of science and who have no respect or knowledge of how it works. So in this space, I mean, as you guys know, because we've talked about it ad nauseum, I mean, there are just so many frauds. They're just, it's runaway conspiracy theory. And then we have, the real crazies. We have the psychics and the dowsing rods and the spirit box people and thank you, Tosh, very, very generous of you. The spirit box people and the dowsing rod people and the tarot card readers and the so-called psychics and mediums and these people claim to have skills that that they can bring to bear in solving true crime cases, and it's embarrassing, and they are humiliating themselves, and they're manipulating the gullible, and nobody seems to notice. Nobody can understand, and there's sort of there's a good side. If you don't want to become too much of a misanthropist, a human hater, or become too cynical, and then worry that you can't trust anybody. Um, you know, Part of the reason that we're credulous is comes from a good place. We we tend to be trustworthy. Unless somebody punches us in the face, if they come up to us and, we live in a relatively safe world, we don't just presume that somebody walking up to us is going to lie to us, especially if they smile and say, hello, how are you? And they're polite. Um, and so, that's a good thing that humans tend to be sort of assume that, people are not necessarily going to lie to them, that they don't mean harm to you. But when we're dealing with, capitalism, we're dealing with people making money, um, we need to be far more cautious with what we believe and who we trust because they have a vested interest that is not the same as yours. Hello, Pendar, and Poor White Trash Angel, and Dixie Chicken. Anybody else I've missed? Um, so, my role here is just to get you to try to become a bit more discerning, a bit more critical. And I don't want you to just distrust everyone. I don't want you to start hating humanity and just succumb to misanthropy and become a nihilist or a excessive skeptic. I just don't want you to enable or promote, um, true claims that not only are likely wrong, but that can be quite harmful in their consequences, especially, from large channel creators who have a large influence. They can affect millions of brains, and those millions of brains can affect millions of brains downstream from them. And as I say, again, as a scientific skeptic, what is my goal here? Well, my my foundational value, my belief, if you want, and if you think that's wrong, by all means challenge me. I think a world where things that are more likely to be true um, flourish, and ideas that are less likely to be true fail is a better world. And so then we have to engage, and I doubt very many of you would disagree with me on that front. Where we're going to disagree is what constitutes a better idea and what constitutes a worse idea, and the methodology for trying to evaluate and determine which ideas are good and which ideas are bad. And unfortunately, ideas are transmitted by people. So we inevitably have to discuss the people who transmit ideas. So I prefer to talk about ideas over people, but ideas don't exist without somebody there to think them up and then to transmit them to other brains. And in some cases, ideas can be understood like viruses. Um, Ideas can be understood in Dawkins terms. We talk about ideas as memes, and memes behaving essentially like viruses or even like genes, where they propagate. And it's almost as if they have a will of their own, like an idea wants to live and it wants to reproduce and it wants to transmit itself and flourish. And so it's in that sense that ideas um, almost seem to take on a life of their own, and certain ideas flourish and certain ideas don't do so well. And unfortunately, I'm here to tell you that bad ideas can can do very well, at least in the short term. And I use a lot of lines, famous quotes to talk about that stuff. Things like, um, I always forget sometimes who said it, but it doesn't matter. They're useful. A lie gets around the world, or gets halfway across the globe before the truth gets its boots on. Unfortunately, because we're storytelling animals, and we tend to like stories that are mysterious and even magical, or certainly sensational, we tend to like those stories even more, it seems, than the cold, hard truth. We're not fond of facts, and I've talked about that from an evolutionary biology perspective. That humans are storytelling animals. They're answer-seeking animals, and when there's not a compelling answer, we invent them. And because people are so needy and desperate for answers, there's always some opportunistic peddler out there willing to sell you an answer. Um, and and if it's an answer that provides you some comfort, or that already satiates your confirmation bias, then you will be very likely to accept it. Because humans don't really care about truth. We talk about it, but we don't really care about the truth. We just want answers, and we tend to prefer answers that are self-satisfying, self-soothing, that confirm our worldview. So if you think everybody's bad, you're more likely to accept a story about somebody being bad. If you see criminals everywhere, and somebody comes and says, that guy's bad, that guy's bad, that guy's bad, um, then you're likely going to accept it, because you certainly are going to prefer any answer to no answer. And that's why, as a scientific skeptic and someone who teaches philosophy, I try to tell us that, maybe we should be able to find more contentment with not knowing, because sometimes we just don't know people. And I'm sorry, but some things we may never know, and sometimes we just don't know. So because you will need to know, you will possibly accept any answer that's presented to you. And then you need to ask a whole series of additional questions. Well, how does this person know? Does this person have good reasons? And then, as a scientist or critical thinking, a good critical thinker, we ask better questions. We are more skeptical. We tend to require more better reasons before we accept something as tentatively true, or tentatively, provisionally the best, most likely answer that's presented. But sometimes you don't know. And if you don't know, you need to put on your big kid's pants and you need to say, we don't know. But this world doesn't reward people who say, I don't know. We reward people that say, I know. And I know it with 100% certainty, because it sounds confident. You're almost like, just like, wow, look how confident this person is. They must know something. I don't know. But look at this person. They're so sure of themselves, and they're yelling it, and they're repeating it. Um, they must know things that I don't know. But do they? I mean, did you even wonder if they do? I mean, did you ask any questions at all? Did you fact check any of the claims? Do you Have they thought about it? Did they provide you any even good evidence? Or is this a mere opinion? Did you not even think about asking those questions? Did they not even make an effort to try to convince you beyond simply yelling it at you and telling you that you're an idiot if you don't accept it? Because those aren't good reasons to believe something. And if you don't demand good reasons to believe something, nobody will provide them to you. And then you will fall prey to a whole host of poor ideas. So, as a critical thinker, just ask questions. Ask, how do you know that? Provide me the evidence. I'm not going to accept your claim until you can meet. I have a high standard of burden of proof. I know that people make things up. I know the difference between facts and opinions. I care about the truth. I don't just want to be fed an answer from somebody who has a vested interest in selling me that answer because they make money off it, because it's sensational, because it's titillating, because it gets me a lot of views and a lot of super chats, because it appeals to people's gut feelings and pulls their heartstrings, and makes them feel emotional or makes them feel good or believe that justice has been served. Because, for example, in this space, when you have a missing child, well, everybody wants that child brought home safe. Everybody wants to find that child. And if that child has been harmed by somebody, we want that person found and we want that person punished. But if you don't know who did that, if you don't even know that the kid didn't just wander off and get lost, um, and you're going to listen to any Tom, Dick, or Harry with the use of a spirit box, speaking to the dead, divining the truth from their grandpa's metal rods, or reading the Ouija board, or tarot cards, or reading handwriting, or alleged expertise in body language, you're going to get duped left, right, and center, and you're enabling people who don't give a damn about missing kids. And now maybe some of them do. Maybe they really do believe that they have special powers. Maybe they actually do truly care and they think that they're adding value. But don't presume that just because they're charismatic or because they seem confident or because they say words loudly or because they have a phone and the internet and they can get on a platform like this and try to convince you. Those aren't reasons to believe anything. Those are illusions. These are You're believing things without any good reasons. And so critical thinking is a set of skills. Science is a set of skills. It's a method for going about trying to evaluate truth claims. And most people unfortunately are not taught how to think well. They're not taught what evidence is. They're not taught how to evaluate truth claims. And we go by our gut. We go by our feelings. Somehow people resonate with us. We we accept their authority because they have a doctor next to their name, or they have a large channel and they're popular. Therefore, they must be true. So let's see. Ryan Upchurch is a rock star and he has 2 million subscribers. Therefore, he's right. So if the question is what is the answer to 1 plus 1, if Kim Kardashian says the answer is 3, if your answer is, but it's Kim Kardashian, she has 50 million followers and she's rich, therefore 1 plus 1 equals 3. No, these are non sequiturs. 1 plus 1 has an objective answer, and it has nothing to do with who gives you the answer, whether they're rich or they're beautiful or they're arrogant or they've been right about other things. There is a right answer to that question. And it has nothing to do with if you're popular. It has nothing to do with if you have a lot of followers. It has nothing to do with if you're rich. It has nothing to do with if you're good looking. None of these factors have anything to do with the answer to the question, what is 1 plus 1? And these are all of the logical fallacies that people engage in all the time. And then obviously we have to talk about, cognitive biases, which I talked about, I talk about all the time, but I talked about the other day. So I mean, how many times have you seen somebody say when you criticize if you engaged in criticizing Ryan Upchurch when he was making absurd conspiracy theories up, how many times did you find yourself engaging with a fan of Upchurch, the so-called Creek Squad, where they said instead of actually addressing your question, your claim, they said you're jealous of Ryan because he's funny or he's popular or he's rich or he's a rock star, and said you're just jealous of him. Well, that's just an ad hominem. These people are not, they don't have the integrity to actually address your question. They just want to discount you because they like the guy for whatever reason. Same thing happens with, Chris McDonough or AWP. Now we have a new case study in all of the AWP fans who felt a particular way watching and following AWP over the years. AWP made them feel a certain way. It made them feel good about humanity. It made them feel like there were people out there who cared and were out there every day trying to find missing people to bring them back to their loved ones. It made us feel good about humanity. We felt like there were heroes out there that were doing good things. And we desperately want to believe in goodness in humans and good works. We desperately want to believe um, that in goodness. And goodness exists, but be careful of goodness that comes dressed in a channel with 3 million subscribers, that sells merch on their channel, that makes hundreds and hundreds of $1,000s a video, and wonder whether or not they're truly driven by doing good or if they're driven by material acquisition and popularity. And and do their interests coincide with yours? Because unfortunately, when it comes to living in a capitalistic world where we reward people with money and we reward popularity and we reward success, be careful that you don't over attribute goodness to wealth and fame and celebrity, because those things don't necessarily mean that somebody's has a concern for the truth. Doesn't necessarily mean that they have a concern for ethics or being responsible or doing things in a considerate way. All that we can say about these people is that they made a lot of money and they're successful. Everything else is something else. That's not the way you determine whether or not something is true or if something is a fact. Something is either a fact or it's not. Popularity does not determine a fact. Um, so yeah. So now we're gonna. So anyway, I think I've ranted on a bit. I think I'm going to take a little break, and then we're going to discuss a video that I saw today and a host of pseudoscience topics that flourish in this space, and try to help you maybe understand, some ways that we can go about to try to determine whether or not we should believe these sorts of things. Um, so I'll be right back. 1 second, please.